The scorching heat of the Mojave Desert pressed down like a weight as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The training exercise was supposed to end 2 hours ago, but her radio had gone dead somewhere between the rocky outcropping and the dry creek bed. She squinted against the blazing sun, scanning the horizon for any sign of the extraction helicopter that should have picked up her team by now. Maria had been through worse situations during her 8 years with Delta Force. The elite Special Operations Unit had trained her to survive in every environment imaginable, from the frozen mountains of Afghanistan to the humid jungles of Central America. But something felt different about this exercise. The communication blackout was too convenient, too complete. Her instincts, honed by countless real missions, were screaming that this was not just another training drill gone wrong. She pulled out her backup radio and tried to raise base camp again. Static filled the airwaves. No response from command, no response from her support team, no response from anyone. The silence was more unsettling than enemy gunfire. At least with gunfire, you knew where you stood. This silence meant she was completely on her own in one of the harshest environments in North America. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of sand, rock, and scattered vegetation that offered little shade and less comfort. The temperature had already climbed past 110 degrees, and the sun was still climbing toward its afternoon peak. Without proper shelter and water, she had maybe 6 hours before dehydration became a serious problem. 12 hours before it became life-threatening. Maria adjusted the straps of her tactical pack and took inventory of her supplies. One full canteen of water, enough for maybe 4 hours if she rationed it carefully. 3 energy bars that would turn to mush in this heat. A small first aid kit. Her sidearm with 2 full magazines. A combat knife. A signal mirror. And her most important tool, her training. The Delta Force selection process had a 90% failure rate, and the training that followed was even more brutal. They had pushed her beyond every limit she thought she had, then pushed her beyond the limits she discovered along the way. They had dropped her in hostile territory with nothing but her wits and expected her to not only survive, but complete impossible missions. This desert might be hot, and she might be alone, but she was far from helpless. She started walking east, toward where the extraction point should have been. Her boots crunched against the hardpan earth, each step deliberate and measured. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Every movement had to be purposeful, every decision calculated to maximize her chances of survival and rescue. As she walked, Maria's mind raced through possible scenarios. Equipment failure could explain the radio silence, but not the missing helicopter. Weather was clear, visibility perfect. The most likely explanation was that something had gone wrong back at base camp, an emergency that required all available aircraft. A security breach that meant radio silence until the situation was resolved. Or worse. The thought that had been nagging at her since the radios went dead finally crystallized into a cold certainty. This was not a training exercise. This was real. Somehow, somewhere, something had gone catastrophically wrong, and she had been left behind to figure it out on her own. Maria increased her pace slightly, but not enough to cause excessive sweating. Water loss was her biggest enemy right now. More dangerous than the heat, more dangerous than potential hostiles, more dangerous than getting lost. She had to find shelter before the sun reached its peak, and she had to find it soon. The landscape seemed monotonous to an untrained eye, but Maria read it like a tactical map. The rock formations told her about water flow during the rare desert rains. The vegetation patterns revealed underground moisture. The animal tracks, barely visible in the hard earth, pointed toward water sources that might save her life. A flash of movement caught her eye about 200 meters to the south. Not an animal. Too deliberate, too careful. Maria dropped into a crouch behind a cluster of rocks and observed. 2 figures in desert camouflage were moving parallel to her course, staying just far enough away to avoid easy detection. They were tracking her. Her blood ran cold. This definitely was not a training exercise. Training scenarios did not use live opposition forces without briefing the participants. Training scenarios did not involve being hunted across the desert by unknown hostiles. Someone wanted her isolated, alone, and vulnerable. Maria's Delta Force training kicked into high gear. She was no longer just a soldier trying to survive in the desert. She was an elite warrior being hunted by unknown enemies for unknown reasons. Every skill she had learned in 8 years of special operations came flooding back. Surveillance, counter-surveillance, evasion, and if necessary, elimination. She waited until the two figures moved behind a ridge, then quickly changed direction, angling northwest toward a series of rock formations that would provide better concealment. Her movements became fluid, almost ghost-like. Years of training in urban warfare and wilderness operations had taught her how to move without being seen, how to use terrain to her advantage, how to become invisible even in open ground. The rock formations offered blessed shade and multiple escape routes. Maria settled into a defensive position and pulled out her binoculars to get a better look at her pursuers. Two men, definitely military trained based on their movement patterns. Professional-grade equipment. They were not just random hostiles. Someone had sent them specifically for her. As she watched, a third figure appeared from the opposite direction, then a fourth. They were trying to box her in, using classic encirclement tactics. But they had made one critical mistake. They were treating her like a standard soldier trying to evade capture. They had no idea they were hunting one of the most elite warriors in the United States military. Maria smiled grimly. She had been in worse situations. She had been outnumbered before, outgunned before, cut off from support before. The difference was that those had been official missions with clear objectives and defined rules of engagement. This time, she did not know who these people were or what they wanted. That actually worked in her favor. Without clear rules of engagement, she could use every dirty trick she had learned in 8 years of unconventional warfare. The sun was approaching its peak, and the heat was becoming almost unbearable. Even in the shade, the temperature had to be over 115 degrees. Her pursuers would be suffering too, possibly more than her. Delta Force desert survival training was among the most comprehensive in the world. If these were regular soldiers, they might not be prepared for extended operations in this heat. Maria decided to test that theory. Instead of continuing to evade, she began to hunt. She moved silently through the rocks, using her knowledge of the terrain to predict where her pursuers would go next. If they were following standard search patterns, she could get ahead of them, set up an observation post, and possibly turn the tables. The first target appeared exactly where she expected him to be. He was moving carefully but predictably, following a dry wash that provided good concealment but limited his escape routes. Maria positioned herself on the high ground overlooking his path and waited. The soldier was good, she had to admit. His movement was disciplined, his weapon handling professional. But he was also showing signs of heat stress. His pace was slightly irregular, his scanning pattern not quite as thorough as it should be. The desert was working in her favor. When he passed directly below her position, Maria made her move. She dropped silently from the rocks, landing behind him with barely a sound. Her combat knife was at his throat before he knew she was there. "Who sent you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying unmistakable menace. The soldier tensed, probably considering his options. Maria increased the pressure on the blade just enough to make her point clear. "I asked you a question. Who sent you? And what do you want?" "Contract," the soldier gasped. "Private military. Big money to bring you in alive." "Bring me in for what? Who is paying?" "Don't know. Orders came through channels. Find the female Delta operator, bring her in for questioning. That is all we were told." Maria processed this information quickly. Someone wanted her specifically. Not just any soldier. Someone who knew her background, her unit, her capabilities. Someone with enough money to hire professional mercenaries. This was not a random operation. "How many of you are there?" "6 total. 2 teams of 3. "Where is your extraction point?" The soldier hesitated. Maria adjusted the knife. "Where?" "Helicopter pickup, 12 clicks north. Midnight rendezvous." Maria knocked him unconscious with a precise strike to a pressure point and zip-tied his hands behind his back. She took his radio, his water, and his GPS device. Now she had actionable intelligence and slightly better odds. The radio crackled to life. Team 2, report status. Maria keyed the microphone, pitching her voice low and adding static by holding the radio farther from her mouth. Team 2, continuing search pattern. No contact. Copy that. Team 3 reports possible movement in Sector 7. Converge on grid reference 47 Alpha. Perfect. She now knew where the other teams were heading, and she knew they had not realized one of their own was down. She had maybe 10 minutes before they missed the unconscious soldier's next scheduled check-in. Maria moved quickly through the rocks, paralleling the route the other teams would take to reach Sector 7. If she could get there first, she could set up another ambush. The heat was actually working in her favor now. Her pursuers were thinking about water and shade, not about the possibility that their target had become the hunter. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as she climbed to a commanding position overlooking the convergence point. 2 more soldiers appeared, moving cautiously but clearly affected by the heat. Their pace was slower than it should be, their alertness compromised by the need to conserve energy in the brutal conditions. Maria had faced Taliban fighters in the mountains of Afghanistan, cartel soldiers in the jungles of Colombia, and terrorist operatives in the urban chaos of Iraq. But this felt different. This felt personal. Someone wanted her specifically, and they were willing to send professional military contractors into the desert to get her. As she watched the soldiers below, Maria's mind raced through possibilities. Who had the resources and motivation to hire private military contractors? Who knew her identity and operational history well enough to target her specifically? And most importantly, what did they want with her? The radio crackled again. All teams, check in. Team 1, negative contact. Team 3, negative contact. A pause. Team 2, report. Silence. Team 2, respond immediately. More silence. All teams, Team 2 is non-responsive. Possible compromise. Switch to Protocol 7 immediately. Maria did not know what Protocol 7 was, but it probably meant they were abandoning subtlety in favor of aggressive pursuit. Her window for picking them off one by one was closing rapidly. Time to change tactics. She moved away from the convergence point and toward higher ground. If they were switching to aggressive pursuit, they would probably call in air support or additional ground teams. Her best option now was to reach the high country where she could see threats coming from a distance, and where the terrain would limit their options. The climb was brutal in the desert heat. Every step was an effort, every breath like inhaling fire. But Maria had climbed mountains in Afghanistan while carrying a full combat load and being shot at. This was just heat and altitude. She could handle heat and altitude. From the ridge, she could see for miles in every direction. To the north, she spotted the dust trail of approaching vehicles. At least 3, moving fast across the desert floor. To the south, the thermal distortion made it hard to see clearly, but there was definitely movement. They were bringing in reinforcements. Maria checked her water. Half a canteen left. The smart play was to conserve it, find shade, and wait for nightfall. But waiting meant letting them surround her with overwhelming numbers. The aggressive play was to keep moving, stay ahead of the search teams, and try to reach civilization before the heat or the mercenaries got her. She chose aggression. Delta Force had not trained her to wait and hope for the best. They had trained her to seize the initiative, control the battlefield, and win against impossible odds. The desert might be their killing ground, but she was going to make it hers. The radio provided a constant stream of intelligence as the mercenaries coordinated their search. They were professionals, but they were also operating in an environment that was as much her enemy as theirs. Every minute they spent in the open desert was a minute closer to heat exhaustion. Every gallon of fuel they burned was a gallon they could not use for extraction. Every resource they committed to finding her was a resource they could not use for other operations. Maria began to implement a strategy she had used successfully in Iraq. Make the enemy commit resources to pursuing her, then disappear and strike where they were weak. She would lead them on a chase across the desert, forcing them to expend energy and supplies, then pick them off when they were exhausted and desperate. The sun was reaching its deadly afternoon peak as she started down the far side of the ridge. Behind her, the dust trails were getting closer. Ahead of her lay more desert, more rocks, more opportunities to turn the tables on her hunters. They had wanted to leave her alone under the desert sun, probably thinking she would be helpless and easy to capture. They had no idea what a Delta Force warrior could do. The afternoon heat was like being inside an oven, but Maria Rodriguez had turned it into her weapon. For 3 hours, she had led the mercenary teams through the most punishing terrain in the Mojave Desert, always staying just ahead of them, always forcing them to expend energy and resources while she conserved hers. Her Delta Force training had taught her that survival was not about avoiding conflict, but about controlling it. She crouched behind a cluster of Joshua trees, monitoring the radio chatter from the captured device. The mercenaries were struggling. Their voices carried the strain of heat exhaustion, and their coordination was breaking down. What had started as a professional military operation was becoming a desperate manhunt in conditions that were killing the hunters as much as the hunted. Base, this is Team Leader. We need immediate resupply. Water situation is critical. Negative, Team Leader. Mission parameters require radio silence until target is secured. Base, you do not understand. We have lost contact with Team 2 completely. Team 3 is showing signs of severe dehydration. This target is not behaving like intelligence suggested. Intelligence stands. Target is isolated female operator, alone and without support. Continue mission. Maria almost laughed. Whoever had hired these mercenaries had seriously underestimated what they were dealing with. They thought they were hunting a stranded soldier. Instead, they had walked into a carefully orchestrated counter-operation run by one of the most elite warriors in the United States military. The radio crackled again. All teams, be advised. Helicopter support is inbound. ETA 30 minutes. Drive target toward extraction grid. This changed everything. Helicopter support meant they could cover vast areas quickly, coordinate ground teams more effectively, and potentially bring in fresh personnel who were not already compromised by heat exhaustion. Maria needed to either neutralize that helicopter or be long gone before it arrived. She studied the terrain around her, looking for options. To the east, the desert stretched for miles without significant cover. To the west, a series of deep arroyos cut through the landscape like scars. To the north, the land rose toward a line of rocky hills that would provide excellent defensive positions, but would also trap her against impassable terrain. South seemed like the best option, but it was also the most obvious. That was probably where they expected her to go, which made it either the worst choice or the best choice, depending on how she played it. Maria decided to make them think she was going south while actually going north. It was a risky move that required perfect timing, but it was exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that had kept her alive through 8 years of special operations. She broke cover and moved south, deliberately leaving tracks and signs that experienced trackers would be able to follow. She wanted them to think she was making a run for the Mexican border, which was still over 50 miles away but represented the closest international boundary. A desperate fugitive might try for Mexico. An elite operator was going to do something much more unexpected. After covering about half a mile, Maria reached a rocky wash that ran east-west across the desert floor. She entered the wash from the south side, walked upstream for about 200 meters, then carefully backtracked in her own footprints before climbing out on the north side. If done correctly, her trail would appear to continue south through the wash, while she actually headed north toward the hills. The maneuver took precious time and energy, but it should buy her the confusion she needed. The radio confirmed that it was working. Team 3 has tracks heading south through the main wash. Target appears to be making for the border. Copy that. All teams converge on southern sector. Helicopter will establish blocking positions along likely border crossing points. Perfect. They were committing all their resources to the wrong area. Maria started her climb toward the northern hills, moving carefully to avoid leaving sign on the rocky ground. The helicopter would arrive soon, but it would be looking in the wrong place. The climb was brutal in the afternoon heat, but Maria pushed through it. Every step up meant better defensive positions, better observation, and more options for counterattack. The rocky terrain would limit the helicopter's effectiveness and give her multiple escape routes if the ground teams figured out her deception. From the hills, she could see the entire operational area spread out below her like a three-dimensional tactical map. The dust trails of the ground teams were all heading south, exactly as planned. In the distance, She could make out the approaching helicopter, flying low and fast toward the border region. Maria allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had successfully turned a desperate escape into a tactical victory. The mercenaries were now scattered across miles of desert, chasing shadows while she held the high ground with excellent observation and multiple escape routes. But the satisfaction was short-lived. The radio brought disturbing news. Base, this is air support. Thermal imaging shows no heat signature in target zone. Repeat, no heat signature. Target is not in the southern sector. Impossible. Ground teams have fresh tracks. Negative. Infrared is clear. Target has evaded southern sector. There was a long pause, then a different voice came on the radio. Older, more experienced, definitely not one of the field operatives. All teams, this is Control. Target is displaying capabilities beyond mission parameters. Recommend immediate extraction and reassessment. Negative, Control. Contract specifies target delivery within 24 hours. Failure penalties are unacceptable. Then you better hope your teams are better than this target, because what I am seeing does not look like a stranded soldier. This looks like active resistance from a highly trained special operations professional. Maria smiled grimly. At least someone on their side understood what they were dealing with. Unfortunately for them, understanding the problem and solving it were two very different things. The helicopter was now circling back toward the center of the operational area, its thermal imaging system scanning for her heat signature. Maria had found an overhang that provided shade and concealment, but she knew the thermal protection would not last forever. As the rocks cooled in the evening, her body heat would start to show up more clearly. She needed to move, but movement in open terrain would expose her to the helicopter's observation. The solution was to move when they were not looking, or to move in a way that they could not effectively track. The old mine shaft appeared almost like a gift from the desert. Hidden in a fold of rock about 50 meters from her current position, the entrance was barely visible even from close range. Maria had spotted it only because her trained eye had noticed the unnatural shadow pattern and the slight discoloration of rock that indicated human excavation. She waited until the helicopter was at the far end of its search pattern, then moved quickly to the mine entrance. The shaft angled down into the mountain, carved by long-dead miners seeking silver or copper in the harsh desert landscape. The air was cooler underground, and more importantly, she would be completely invisible to thermal imaging. The mine shaft was deeper than she expected, extending back into the mountain for at least 100 meters. Support timbers suggested it had been a serious mining operation, not just a prospector's hole. More importantly, there were signs of relatively recent use. Water bottles, food wrappers, evidence that someone had been using this as shelter. Maria explored carefully, alert for cave-ins, dangerous gases, or other hazards that made abandoned mines notorious death traps. But this shaft seemed solid, well-ventilated, and safe for temporary occupation. She settled into a defensible position near the entrance where she could observe the desert below while remaining completely concealed. The helicopter spent 2 hours searching the area, its thermal imaging system sweeping back and forth across the terrain where Maria should have been. Ground teams were repositioned to search areas where the tracks indicated she might have gone. Radio chatter revealed growing frustration and concern about mission timelines. Control, this is Team Leader. We have now been in field for 8 hours. Personnel are showing significant heat casualties. Request permission to extract and reassess. Negative. Mission timeline is critical. Target must be secured within next 16 hours. Control, we may not have effective personnel in 16 hours. This environment is exceeding operational parameters. Then you better find her quickly. Maria checked her own condition. Her water was running low, but she was in shade and out of the wind. Her energy reserves were good, and her morale was excellent. She was winning this fight, and everyone involved knew it. As evening approached, the temperature started to drop toward merely unbearable. The helicopter had expanded its search pattern, which meant they were admitting they had lost her completely. Ground teams were consolidating in defensive positions, which meant they were switching from pursuit to containment. The radio brought more concerning intelligence. All teams, be advised. Second helicopter with reinforcements is en route. ETA 4 hours. Fresh personnel with night vision capabilities. Copy that. Current teams will maintain containment until reinforcements arrive. Night vision capabilities change the tactical situation significantly. Maria's advantages in darkness would be greatly reduced if they had proper thermal and light amplification equipment. She needed to either resolve this situation before the reinforcements arrived or find a way to level the playing field. The mine shaft offered an interesting possibility. If she could draw the ground teams into underground terrain, their numerical advantage would be neutralized, and their night vision equipment would be useless in the complete darkness of the underground passages. But that would require getting them to follow her underground, which meant exposing herself to draw them in. Maria spent the remaining daylight hours exploring the mine system more thoroughly. It was more extensive than she had initially thought, with multiple shafts, cross-tunnels, and vertical passages that suggested a complex underground network. Some passages showed signs of recent use, including cached supplies that indicated someone had been using this as a long-term base. In one of the deeper passages, she found something that changed everything. A cache of military-grade equipment including night vision goggles, communication gear, and weapons. This was not just an abandoned mine. Someone had been using it as an operational base. The equipment was professional grade, recently maintained, and included items that were not available on the civilian market. Maria examined the cache carefully, looking for clues about who had been operating from this location. The equipment was American, but that did not mean much. American military equipment was available worldwide through various channels. More interesting was a waterproof case containing documents and maps. Maria opened it carefully, alert for booby traps, and found intelligence reports, operational plans, and most importantly, information about her own unit and mission history. Someone had been conducting surveillance on Delta Force operations for months. The implications were staggering. This was not a random kidnapping attempt or a case of mistaken identity. Someone had been specifically targeting her based on detailed intelligence about her background, her capabilities, and her current assignment. The training exercise that had supposedly gone wrong was actually an elaborate trap designed to isolate her from her unit. Among the documents was a contract for her capture and delivery to an unknown client. The amount was substantial, enough to hire professional mercenaries and support equipment for an extended operation. But more disturbing was the client requirement. She was to be delivered alive and unharmed for debriefing purposes. Maria photographed the documents with her phone before returning them to the case exactly as she had found them. She now had proof that this was an organized operation with significant resources behind it. But she also had a tactical advantage. She knew about the cache, but they probably did not know she had found it. The radio brought updates on the approaching reinforcements. Air Support 2 is inbound with 8 personnel and full night operations package. Grid reference for landing zone has been transmitted. Copy that. Current teams are establishing perimeter security around suspected target area. 8 fresh personnel with night operations capabilities meant the odds were about to shift dramatically against her. Maria needed to either eliminate some of the current threats before the reinforcements arrived or find a way to escape the area completely. She decided on a combination approach. Using the equipment from the cache, she would hunt the current teams during the darkness, reducing their numbers and degrading their morale before the reinforcements arrived. Then she would use the mine system to disappear completely, leaving them to search for a ghost. The night vision goggles transformed her tactical situation. Now she could see them, but they could not see her. She could move through the darkness like a predator while they stumbled around with flashlights and limited visibility. The hunter had become the hunted, and they did not even know it yet. Maria left the mine shaft as full darkness settled over the desert. The temperature had dropped to merely oppressive, and her enemies were finally getting some relief from the heat that had been slowly killing them all day. But their relief was about to be short-lived. The first team was in a defensive position overlooking the mine entrance, probably hoping she would try to use it for shelter. They had made a classic mistake. They had found good terrain and decided to hold it instead of continuing to search aggressively. That made them predictable, and predictable enemies were dead enemies. Maria approached from above, using the rocky terrain to mask her movement. Through the night vision goggles, the 2 mercenaries looked like green ghosts, clearly visible against the cooler background of the rocks. They were alert and well-positioned, but they were watching for threats from the wrong direction. She dropped silently into their position, striking both men unconscious before either could raise an alarm. She zip-tied them securely and confiscated their equipment, including radios, weapons, and night vision devices. Now she had better equipment than her remaining enemies. The radio chatter revealed growing concern. Team 4, report status. Silence. Team 4, respond immediately. More silence. Control, we have lost contact with Team 4. Team 5 is investigating. Maria smiled in the darkness. Let them investigate. She would be waiting. The Desert Knight had become Maria Rodriguez's domain. Armed with captured night vision equipment and the tactical advantage of superior training, she moved through the darkness like a ghost, systematically dismantling the mercenary operation that had been sent to capture her. 3 teams were down, their personnel neutralized, and their equipment confiscated. The remaining mercenaries were growing desperate. Control, this is Team Leader. We have lost contact with 70% of our ground assets. Request immediate extraction. This target is beyond mission parameters. Negative on extraction. Reinforcements are 15 minutes out. Hold position and await support. Control, you do not understand the situation. This is not a rescue operation anymore. We are being hunted by a highly skilled operator who knows this terrain better than we do. Our people are not dead, but they are being systematically eliminated. Maintain radio discipline. Execute containment protocol until reinforcements arrive. Maria listened to the exchange with grim satisfaction. The voice from Control was becoming increasingly strained, suggesting that whoever was running this operation was under significant pressure to deliver results. That desperation might make them careless, but it also made them more dangerous. She had positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the landing zone where the reinforcements would arrive. The helicopter was approaching fast, its rotor noise echoing across the desert landscape. 8 fresh operatives with full night capabilities would definitely shift the odds, but Maria had spent the evening preparing for their arrival. The mine shaft had provided more than just equipment. Deep in the tunnels, she had found explosive materials left by the previous occupant, along with detailed maps of the underground network. The person who had been using this as a base had been planning something significant, and they had left behind the tools Maria needed to complete her own operation. The helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust and engine noise. 8 figures in full tactical gear deployed rapidly, spreading into defensive positions while their equipment was unloaded. Night vision systems, thermal imaging, communication gear, and enough firepower to take on a small army, professional, disciplined, and very dangerous. But Maria had advantages they did not know about. She knew the terrain intimately after spending the day traversing every foot of it. She had superior observation from the high ground. Most importantly, she had the tactical initiative. They were reacting to her movements while she controlled the pace and location of every engagement. The radio chatter revealed their operational plan. Ground teams, this is Nighthawk Leader. We are establishing base camp at the landing zone. Thermal sweep shows possible heat signatures in grid squares 4 through 7. Teams Alpha and Bravo will advance on those positions while teams Charlie and Delta provide overwatch. Copy that, Nighthawk. Be advised, target has demonstrated capabilities far beyond initial intelligence. Recommend extreme caution. Understood. All teams treat this as a combat operation. Target is considered armed, extremely dangerous, and tactically proficient. Maria smiled in the darkness. Finally, someone was taking her seriously. But recognition of the threat did not automatically translate into ability to counter it. They were still operating in her chosen environment, under conditions she had shaped to her advantage. She waited until the teams had spread out across the desert floor, then activated the first surprise she had prepared for them. The explosive charge she had placed near their landing zone was small, designed for psychological effect rather than casualties. It detonated with a sharp crack and a flash of light that temporarily blinded anyone using night vision equipment. Contact. Explosive device at the landing zone. All teams. Convergent movement on the LZ. Possible attack in progress. Negative contact. No hostile forces visible. The explosion had exactly the effect Maria wanted. It forced them to abandon their planned search pattern and converge on the landing zone, bunching them up in a defensive formation that limited their ability to search effectively. It also announced that their target was not just evading capture, but actively engaging them with improvised explosive devices. While they were regrouping and checking for casualties that did not exist, Maria moved to her next position. She had spent hours during the day identifying the perfect terrain for what she planned to do next. A narrow canyon about 2 kilometers from the landing zone offered the ideal conditions for the kind of engagement she wanted. The canyon was deep enough to limit helicopter support, narrow enough to channel movement, and complex enough to provide multiple escape routes. Most importantly, it contained several natural choke points where superior numbers meant nothing and individual skill meant everything. Maria positioned herself at the far end of the canyon and sent a radio transmission on the frequency she knew they would be monitoring. "This is Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, United States Army Special Operations. To the mercenaries currently operating in this area, you have one opportunity to withdraw. Leave now, and no one gets hurt. Continue this operation, and I will defend myself with lethal force." The radio erupted with activity. "Did you copy that transmission? Target has identified herself as Military Special Operations. Control, be advised Target claims to be U.S. Army Special Operations. Request guidance on rules of engagement. Disregard Target claims. Mission parameters unchanged. Bring her in alive. Copy that. But if she is actually military special ops, this could become a political incident. Not your concern. Execute mission as planned." Maria had deliberately identified herself to create confusion and hesitation among the mercenaries. Professional soldiers, even mercenaries, were usually reluctant to engage U.S. military personnel without clear justification. The radio chatter suggested that at least some of them were having second thoughts about the mission. But hesitation only went so far when there was money involved. The thermal imaging from the helicopter soon picked up her heat signature in the canyon, and the ground teams began moving toward her position. "Nighthawk Leader has thermal contact in canyon system, grid reference 88 Alpha. All ground teams converge on that position. Copy that. Teams Alpha and Bravo are moving to blocking positions. Teams Charlie and Delta will advance through the canyon." They were making exactly the tactical error Maria had hoped for. Instead of bypassing the canyon or calling in close air support to neutralize it from a distance, they were committing ground forces to terrain that favored the defender. It was probably ego as much as tactical thinking. After being embarrassed by a single operator for 12 hours, they wanted to prove they could take her in direct combat. Maria let the first team enter the canyon before springing her trap. The narrow walls amplified the sound of the flashbang grenade, creating a disorienting noise that echoed for several seconds. In the confusion that followed, she eliminated both team members with non-lethal precision strikes and confiscated their equipment. "Charlie team is down. Request immediate support. Delta team moving to assist. Negative, do not enter the canyon. Target is using terrain to channel our movement." But the warning came too late. Delta team was already committed to the narrow passage, and Maria was waiting for them at the next choke point. 2 more mercenaries went down without firing a shot. "Control, this is Nighthawk Leader. Ground teams are being systematically eliminated in close quarters combat. Recommend immediate withdrawal and reassessment." Negative. Air support is authorized to engage with non-lethal weapons. Subdue target for extraction. The helicopter swept low over the canyon, its searchlight stabbing down through the darkness. Maria had anticipated this response and was already moving through passages too narrow for effective air attack. The rocky walls protected her from anything but a direct hit, and the complex terrain made targeting nearly impossible. "Nighthawk, unable to acquire target. Canyon system provides too much cover." "Then get the remaining ground teams in there and dig her out." "Control, we have 2 effective personnel remaining from 8 ground operatives. Target has eliminated or incapacitated 6 team members without sustaining any apparent casualties. Request immediate reinforcement or permission to abort mission." There was a long pause before Control responded, and when the voice came back, it carried the tone of someone under extreme pressure. "Mission abort is not authorized. Contract penalties for failure exceed operational costs. Find another way to complete the mission." Maria listened to this exchange with growing understanding. This was not just about money, though the amounts involved were clearly substantial. Someone was under pressure to deliver her to an unknown client, and that pressure was driving increasingly desperate decision-making. She keyed the radio on the frequency they had been using for command communications. "Control, this is your target. I have a proposition for you." Static filled the airwaves for several seconds before a response came. "This is Control. We are listening. Your operation has failed. You have lost most of your personnel, expended significant resources, and gained nothing. Cut your losses and withdraw. That is not possible. Then tell me what this is really about. Who wants me, and why? Maybe we can work something out." Another pause, longer this time. "Negative. Mission continues as planned." "Then you are going to lose the rest of your people." Maria clicked off the radio and settled in to wait. She had given them a chance to end this without further casualties, but they had chosen to continue. That was their mistake. The next attack came from an unexpected direction. Instead of trying to force the canyon, they attempted to repel personnel from the helicopter directly into her position. It was a bold tactical move that might have worked against a lesser opponent. But Maria had 8 years of experience dealing with helicopter insertions in hostile terrain. She heard the aircraft maneuvering into position and was ready when the first repeller appeared above the canyon rim. A precisely placed shot from her captured weapon severed the rappelling rope, sending the mercenary tumbling into the safety net she had stretched across the canyon floor for exactly this purpose. The second repeller, seeing his partner's fate, tried to abort the insertion but found himself dangling helplessly in midair when Maria shot out his attachment point. She lowered him safely to the canyon floor, where he joined his unconscious colleagues in zip-tie restraints. "Control. Insertion attempt has failed. Recommend we fall back and wait for daylight." "Negative. Dawn is in 4 hours. Mission must be completed before first light." Maria checked her watch. 4 hours until dawn meant 4 hours until she could signal for extraction. Her phone had finally gotten a weak signal in the higher terrain, and she had managed to send an encrypted message to Delta Force emergency channels. Help was coming, but she needed to survive until it arrived. The mercenaries were running out of options, which made them increasingly dangerous. Desperate people made desperate choices, and desperate choices often involved abandoning safety protocols in favor of results. Maria needed to be prepared for anything. The anything turned out to be a direct assault using the helicopter as close air support. The aircraft swept low through the canyon, its searchlights illuminating everything while ground personnel advanced under its protection. It was tactically sound but operationally risky, especially in the narrow confines of the canyon system. Maria had prepared for this scenario as well. The explosive charges she had placed at strategic points along the canyon walls were larger than the psychological device she had used at the landing zone. When detonated simultaneously, they created a rock slide that blocked the canyon and forced the helicopter to climb rapidly to avoid the falling debris. "Air support is taking fire. Repeat, air support is under attack." "Negative, Nighthawk. No small arms fire detected. Target is using demolitions to alter terrain. Canyon is blocked, unable to provide effective support to ground teams." In the chaos that followed, Maria systematically eliminated the remaining ground personnel. They were trapped in the canyon with limited escape routes, no air support, and an opponent who knew every inch of the terrain. It was not a fair fight, but fairness had never been part of the equation. When the dust settled, literally and figuratively, Maria had neutralized the entire mercenary force without causing a single fatality. Every operative was alive, restrained, and available for questioning by the appropriate authorities. More importantly, she had confiscated enough equipment and intelligence to expose the entire operation. The radio crackled one final time. "Control. All ground assets are down. Mission is a complete failure. Target has successfully resisted capture and neutralized our entire force. Understood. Initiate Protocol 9. Control? What is Protocol 9? Eliminate all evidence. That includes witnesses." The cold tone of that transmission sent chills through Maria. Protocol 9 apparently meant killing their own people to prevent capture and interrogation. These were not just mercenaries. They were part of something much larger and more dangerous. The helicopter had climbed out of the canyon and was now circling at a safe altitude. Through her night vision system, Maria could see weapon pods being armed. They were preparing to eliminate everyone in the canyon, including their own people. Nighthawk, you are ordered to eliminate all personnel in the canyon. No survivors. Control, our people are down there. Execute Protocol 9 immediately. Maria keyed her radio one final time. Nighthawk, this is the target. Your control just ordered your execution along with mine. Your people down here are unconscious but alive. You can save them, or you can follow orders and murder them. Your choice. The helicopter continued circling, but the weapons remained unarmed. After several minutes, the pilot's voice came over the radio. Control, I am declaring a mechanical emergency, returning to base for immediate maintenance. Nighthawk, you will execute Protocol 9 or face severe consequences. Control, my aircraft is experiencing critical systems failure. I am unable to continue mission. All personnel will be extracted immediately. The helicopter descended into the canyon and began loading the unconscious mercenaries. Maria remained hidden but close enough to observe. The pilot was a professional, probably military trained, and he had made the right choice when ordered to murder his own people. As the helicopter lifted off with its cargo of defeated mercenaries, Maria finally allowed herself to relax. The immediate threat was over. The radio had gone silent, suggesting that Control had abandoned the operation rather than risk further exposure. Dawn was breaking over the desert as Maria climbed out of the canyon system. In the distance, she could see dust trails approaching from the east. The cavalry was finally arriving, but the battle was already over. 2 Blackhawk helicopters touched down near the mine shaft, disgorging a full Delta Force assault team along with command and intelligence personnel. Maria walked toward them slowly, hands visible, knowing that they would be extremely careful about identifying targets in this situation. Viper 6, this is Desert Rose. I am approaching from the northwest, friendly coming in. Desert Rose, this is Viper 6. Good to see you alive. We have been tracking this situation for the last 6 hours. Are you injured? Negative injuries. Multiple prisoners in the canyon system requiring medical attention. Full intelligence package available for debriefing. Copy that. Medical team is standing by. As the medical team headed toward the canyon to treat the captured mercenaries, Maria handed over the intelligence documents she had photographed. The Delta Force commander reviewed them quickly, his expression growing increasingly grim. This is bigger than a simple kidnapping attempt. Someone has been conducting surveillance on our operations for months. We need to get you back to base immediately for a full debrief. Understood, but I want to know who is behind this. Someone hired professional mercenaries to capture a Delta Force operator. That requires serious resources and inside knowledge of our operations. We will find out. But first, let me ask you something. How did you manage to neutralize an entire mercenary force by yourself in desert conditions? Maria looked back at the canyon where she had fought her final battle, then at the mine shaft where she had found the equipment that turned the tide, then at the endless expanse of desert that had been both enemy and ally during the longest day of her military career. They left me alone under the desert sun, thinking I would be helpless. They had no idea what a Delta Force warrior could do. The extraction helicopter lifted off into the dawn sky, carrying Maria away from the desert battlefield where she had proven that training, determination, and tactical thinking could overcome any odds. Behind them, the investigation teams were already beginning the process of unraveling the conspiracy that had targeted her. But Maria knew this was just the beginning. Someone with significant resources and inside knowledge had tried to capture her for unknown purposes. They had failed this time, but they would likely try again. The desert had taught her that survival was not about avoiding conflict, but about winning it decisively when it came. And the next time someone tried to hunt a Delta Force warrior, they would face an enemy who had already proven what she could do when left alone under the desert sun.